Hello and welcome back to Talking Europe. Regrexit, Bregret, Britain. We've heard all these memes since the UK left the European Union on February the 1st, 2020. But there's no point crying over spilt milk. And now the geopolitical stars have aligned for a closer UK-EU orbit, what with President Donald Trump brandishing the threat of trade tariffs, or Russian forces making gains in eastern Ukraine, or indeed climate change accelerating at an unprecedented pace. Well, to explore the opportunities for a stronger relationship, I'm joined by guests from London and Brussels. Dominic Grieve is a prominent British politician and co-chair of the European Movement UK. And Sandro Gozzi is an Italian politician and MEP elected in France. He chairs the delegation to the EU-UK Parliamentary Partnership Assembly. Thanks to both of you for joining me. Sandro Gozzi, let's start with you.
Yeah.
You've said that it's up to the British to know what a reset actually means.
Yeah.
Do you think this government knows what it actually wants?
I don't think he knows yet. I understand that certainly they are very keen in cooperating on security, both hard security, military matters, and soft security, police, migration, borders control. But I think that they should be clearer. And I hope that the meeting that we have, the parliamentary meeting that we have in March, the governmental summit that should happen before May, will help us to better understand what does Britain means with resettling. We are certainly interested, but David is in detail and we need to understand better.
So Dominic Grieve, just in response to that point about some of these events that are coming up, the EU-UK summit this spring, and of course there's this defence retreat as well beforehand. Do you get a sense that, at least on the defence issues, there's a clearer sense of what this relationship could look like?
I have to say I'm not persuaded the government has sorted itself out on this. Clearly, there are powerful incentives for the government to want closer cooperation. And on defence, I think that there will be progress because of the situation in the Ukraine. At the same time, long-standing UK policy has been not to undermine, to rely on NATO rather than the EU as the key partnership. And so how the UK wants to develop the EU relationship is, I think, not completely clear, although it is clear that in terms of engagement and foreign ministers coming over to Brussels and meeting with EU foreign ministers to discuss these issues, they're perfectly ready to do it. On the wider sphere, it's much harder to understand where the UK government wants to go, because they would like a closer relationship, they would like to improve trade links, they would like to reduce bureaucracy, but all that comes at some cost for the United Kingdom, and they don't yet seem to have worked out what the cost is that they're prepared to pay in terms of what they're going to give in return. And this has been the position, I think, not only with the previous Conservative government in its last phase under Rishi Sunak, but also seems surprisingly to create anxiety for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. And particularly anxious that any excessive concessions will immediately be seized on by Reform as a right-wing party to argue that, in fact, Brexit is being undone.
Yeah, I'll come back to that.
Brexit needs to be at least partially undone if we are going to make any progress.
Yeah, we'll come back to that domestic dynamic, but I'd like to come to Sandro Gozzi on one thing that the UK government has set out as a specific detail, which is that it's open to joining something called the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention, or PEM, without being too wonkish about it, Sandro, but this is a customs entity, and is it something that makes sense for both sides to develop?
Yeah, it makes sense, but the point is that, I respect the Brexit decision, but it was a disaster for Britain in terms of trade. Because since Brexit, Britain lost 25% of its export to the EU. And this government has also restricted the margin for manoeuvring, because since the beginning, during the election, in my view, in an unnecessary way, they said, yes, we want to enhance our relation with the Union, but no single market, no customs union, no freedom of movement. And now they are looking for instrument to facilitate trade, custom operation, rule of origin, etc. And certainly the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention is a good, a useful tool to make trade easier. But you see, I mean, the point is that, I mean, after a major mistake, they are trying to pursue a damage limitation. We are very interested in this. We are very interested in this, but it is clear that this goes hand in hand with the proper implementation of the trade and cooperation agreement that we've signed, both EU and UK, and then we want to see fully implemented.
So are you saying that joining the PEM for Britain, it doesn't really make up for the losses of leaving the customs union, not even close to that?
Nothing make up for the losses that Britain is suffering because it abandoned the customs union and because it got out of the European Union. But we are not here to look at the past. We are here to build up a common future. The world has changed. Trump is working, is applying a logic of empire within the West. He sees the European Union as the major obstacle to his logics. I think that UK is understanding that the special relation with the US is going to be a little bit more difficult this time. We got very good reason to cooperate, starting for trade, of course, also looking at the attitude of the new US administration. So there are good political conditions, but we need to specify what we mean by enhancing our bilateral trade relationship.
Speaking of this special relationship, let's go back to Dominic Grieve. Dominic Grieve, do you think that the UK can have a closer trading relationship with the EU and with the US at the same time, or is there fundamentally a choice to be made there?
I think there's fundamentally a choice to be made. And in a way, I suspect the next 18 months will see that choice making itself, because I don't see how we're going to get a closer trading relationship with the United States. The only real issue that is alive at the moment is the UK's hope that by virtue of not being in the EU, the tariffs which Trump is likely to impose will be less for the United Kingdom than for the EU collectively. That's the full extent of it. But that isn't a way forward for developing the UK economy. Ultimately, I think the evidence is overwhelming that it is with our EU trading partners that we are most likely to develop trade. It's what Mrs. Thatcher understood in 1986 when she took us and helped create the single market. But the trouble is that because Brexit was predicated on a belief that the United Kingdom outside of the single market of the EU was going to perform better and deregulate and suddenly become a much more economically competitive nation, to abandon that is hard. And any move towards the harmonization of regulations so as to enable the United Kingdom to trade more freely with our EU partners is what causes the controversy. And until, in my view, the penny drops that these are concessions which have to be made because, in fact, there is no alternative, I think it's going to be quite difficult to persuade the UK government to do it.
And at the moment, you'd say this idea of rejoining the customs union is still politically toxic for the Labour Party, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And funny enough, I think they're mistaken about this, because this is based on a belief that if they were to do it, they would immediately be attacked by reform in old industrial seats where they've historically held and indeed took them back in last year, and that they would lose ground. And maybe I'm not sufficiently connected to those areas, but my feeling when I visit places like that is I think this is now a non-issue. And that people realise that Brexit in its current form doesn't work and would be prepared to accept more regulatory alignment. But it's clearly a risk that the Labour Party is very reluctant to take.
Sandra Gozzi, your thoughts on that? As always, the kind of domestic constraints make it difficult to have this closer relationship, doesn't it?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I understand the fact that Keir Starmer and the Labour cabinet are so cautious, because it is true that in this constituency, especially in Northern England, there is the competition from the extreme right, from Farage. So I mean, certainly this is something that plays a role. But I do believe that, and looking from outside, I'm not a British citizen, even I've worked a lot with Britain, the British citizens are starting to realize. In the last opinion poll last week, I think, 62% of the citizens say that they regret Brexit. Only 12% is still convinced about Brexit, and the rest don't know. So, I mean, I think that step by step, the British citizens are realizing that they have been misguided. You remember when Boris Johnson was promising to them £300 million per week for the National Health Service. I mean, all this propaganda, all this disinformation, which played a role in taking a bad decision, now I think that now is playing a role in making British citizens understand that after all we have a common interest, and it would be in the interest of UK to get a closer partnership with the EU.
Just on one final quick point, we also have, of course, all these other areas that are unfinished from Brexit, you know, financial services, fisheries and so forth. Do you sense any political will to at least, let's say, complete those areas from the withdrawal agreement to make things work better?
Listen, certainly the tone have changed. I mean, the unbearable tones of the Tory government and the unbearable propaganda against Brussels and the European Union, the Tory government, is gone, and nobody regrets this. So the tone is positive, the attitude and the will is positive. It is clear that we think that we should work on a package. And there are very important things for us, such as a long-standing, long-run agreement on fisheries, energy. These things must go hand in hand with the new proposal coming from London. So, I mean, certainly we are ready to work, but we're ready to work on a package of measures and policies.
Waiting for the UK to take the initiative on that.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you so much to both of my guests, Sandro Gozzi here in Brussels and Dominic Grieve in London. Thank you, both of you, for being on this programme, and we'll see you all very soon again here on Talking Europe.